Rebecca stood in the restaurant doorway, her hand resting gently on her son's shoulder as he sat in his wheelchair. The warm glow of Edison bulbs hung from the exposed brick ceiling, casting a golden light over the crowded dining room. She could see him at the bar. Michael, the man from the dating app. He wore a crisp white shirt, his dark hair neatly styled, and he was checking his phone, probably wondering if she'd actually show up. At 45, Rebecca had been widowed for 3 years. Her friends had finally convinced her to try dating again, insisting she deserved companionship, deserved happiness. But those friends didn't understand the complication. Sitting beside her in his bright blue NASA polo shirt, looking up at her with trusting eyes. "Mom, are you sure about this?" her son Ethan asked quietly. At 10 years old, he'd grown perceptive beyond his years. The accident 2 years ago, the car crash that had taken his ability to walk, had changed both their lives in ways they were still learning to navigate. "I'm sure, sweetheart," Rebecca said, though her voice wavered slightly. She smoothed down her champagne-colored dress, the elegant fabric suddenly feeling too fancy, too optimistic. She'd told Michael about Ethan, of course. She'd mentioned having a son, but she hadn't mentioned the wheelchair, hadn't mentioned that wherever she went, Ethan often came too. Not because she couldn't find a sitter her mother would have taken him in a heartbeat, but because Ethan had been having nightmares lately, anxiety about being separated from her. The therapist said it was normal after trauma, that forcing separation too soon could set back his healing. So here they were, together, the way they'd been for the past 2 years, navigating a world that suddenly had stairs where there hadn't been stairs before, doors that were too narrow, and people whose stares ranged from sympathetic to uncomfortable. Rebecca had called the restaurant ahead, made sure there was accessible seating. She'd texted Michael an hour ago, gently mentioning that Ethan would be joining them, keeping it light and brief. He'd responded with the simple "okay," which told her nothing about what he was thinking. Now, watching Michael from across the room, Rebecca took a deep breath. "Ready, buddy?" "Ready," Ethan said, gripping his wheels with the confidence of someone who'd learned to navigate the world on his own terms. They moved through the restaurant. People glanced there while some smiled at Ethan, some looked away quickly, pretending not to notice. Rebecca had learned to read every type of reaction in the past 2 years. Michael turned as they approached. His eyes found Rebecca first, and she saw appreciation there, a warm smile starting to form. Then his gaze dropped to Ethan, and Rebecca watched the smile falter. Not disappear entirely, but shift into something else. Confusion, maybe uncertainty. "Rebecca?" he said, standing from his bar stool. "Hi, Michael," she replied, keeping her voice steady and warm. "This is my son, Ethan." "Hey," Ethan said, offering his hand with the same formal politeness Rebecca had taught him. Michael shook it, but his eyes kept moving between Rebecca and Ethan, and she could see the question forming before he even asked it. The hostess approached, menus in hand. "Your table is ready," she said cheerfully, gesturing toward a corner booth that had been modified to accommodate the wheelchair. They followed her, and Rebecca helped Ethan position himself at the table. Michael sat across from them, and for a moment, there was only the ambient noise of the restaurant, the conversations blending together, the clink of glasses, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Then Michael leaned forward, and the question came, not cruel, but direct, tinged with genuine confusion. "Why did you bring your paralyzed kid here?" The words hung in the air between them. Rebecca heard the gasps from nearby tables, saw a woman at the next booth turn to stare. But before Rebecca could respond, before the familiar defensive anger could rise in her chest, something unexpected happened. Ethan spoke. "Because my mom deserves to have a life," he said simply, looking Michael straight in the eye. "And because I'm part of that life, I always will be." Michael blinked, clearly not expecting a response from the boy. Rebecca felt her heart swell with pride, but she also felt she needed to explain. She took a breath, keeping her voice calm and measured. "Michael, I understand this might not be what you expected," she began. "I did tell you I have a son, and the truth is, Ethan and I come as a package. Not every time, not forever, but right now, we do. He's been through something traumatic, and he needs me close. That's just where we are in our journey." Michael was quiet, processing. Rebecca could see the wheels turning in his mind, and she braced herself for the polite excuse, the quick exit, the message tomorrow saying this wasn't going to work out. She'd imagined this scenario a dozen times. But then something shifted in Michael's expression. He looked at Ethan again, really looked at him, and when he spoke, his voice was different, softer. "I'm sorry," he said. "That came out wrong." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of genuine embarrassment. "I was surprised. And I asked the wrong question." "What did you mean to ask?" Rebecca said carefully. Michael met her eyes, and she saw honesty there. "I guess I meant, how do we make this work? Because you're right up, this isn't what I expected." But, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "My question was rude. It suggested your son was a problem to be solved. And that's not true, is it?" "No," Rebecca said quietly, "it's not." Ethan had been watching this exchange with the intensity children develop when they learned that adult conversations often determine their fate. Now he spoke up again. "I know it's weird," he said to Michael. "Most kids don't come on their mom's dates, but I promise I won't be annoying. I brought my tablet. I can just sit here and play games or something." There was something heartbreaking in the way Ethan offered to make himself invisible, to be less of a burden. Rebecca saw it register on Michael's face too. "Actually," Michael said, and his voice had changed completely now, "I was wondering if you could tell me about that NASA shirt. Are you into space?" Ethan's face lit up, the guarded expression melting away. "Yeah, I want to be an aerospace engineer someday. I've been reading about the Mars rover, and did you know they're planning a manned mission to Mars in the next 15 years? I've been calculating the fuel requirements." And he stopped abruptly, glancing at his mother. "Sorry, I get carried away." "Don't apologize," Michael said, and Rebecca heard genuine interest in his voice. "I actually work in engineering. Not aerospace, but structural. I'd love to hear your calculations. Think they'll hold up?" What happened next, Rebecca would remember for the rest of her life. Michael didn't just politely engage Ethan for a few minutes before turning his attention back to her. He genuinely talked with her son about mathematics, about physics, about the challenges of space travel. He pulled out a napkin and started sketching structural diagrams, showing Ethan how load-bearing calculations worked, how the principles might apply to spacecraft design. Rebecca watched, and slowly, something tight in her chest began to unwind. Their food cameo burgers for Michael and Ethan, salmon for Rebecca, and the conversation flowed naturally. Michael asked Rebecca about her work as a CEO of a small tech company, seeming genuinely impressed by her accomplishments. He told them about his own work, about designing sustainable buildings, about his passion for creating spaces that worked for everyone. "That's actually how I got into accessibility consulting," Michael said, gesturing with a French fry. "About 5 years ago, my firm was hired to renovate an old office building. We did beautiful work on exposed brick, like this place. Lots of glass and open space. Very modern. The client loved it." He paused. "Then we found out one of their employees used a wheelchair, and our beautiful design had made it impossible for her to access half the building." "What did you do?" Rebecca asked. "We redesigned it, on our own dime. Took 3 months and cost us a small fortune. But we learned something invaluably: that beautiful design means nothing if it excludes people." He looked at Ethan. "Now I consult on accessibility for every project. Make sure we're building for everyone from the start." Ethan perked up. "Do you know about the universal design principles? We learned about them in occupational therapy." "I do," Michael said. "Which one do you think is most important?" "Equitable use," Ethan answered immediately. "Because it means nobody gets left out." Michael smiled, and it was a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "You're absolutely right. That's exactly it." As the evening progressed, Rebecca found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't done it on any social occasion, really, in 2 years. Michael didn't treat Ethan as an obligation to be endured or an obstacle to be worked around. He treated him as a person, as someone interesting and valuable. When dessert came, a chocolate cake that the three of them shared, Michael asked the question Rebecca had been waiting for all evening. "Rebecca, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," she said, bracing herself. "What happened?" "If you're comfortable sharing." Rebecca glanced at Ethan, who nodded. They'd told this story before, to therapists and doctors and well-meaning relatives, but this felt different. "Car accident," Rebecca said simply. 2 years ago, a truck ran a red light. Ethan was in the back seat. Her voice stayed steady as she'd learned how to tell the story without breaking. "Spinal injury, T12 vertebra. The doctors said he'd never walk again, but they don't know everything," Ethan added, his voice firm with the hope that Rebecca both cherished and feared might break his heart. "I do physical therapy twice a week. Some people do walk again." Michael nodded slowly. "Sounds like you're a fighter." "I have to be," Ethan said matter-of-factly. "My mom needs me to be strong, so I am." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. Ethan had never said that before, never articulated that he was being brave for her sake. The weight of Ida, this child carrying her burden along with his own, nearly undid her. Michael must have seen something in her face because he changed the subject gently, asking Ethan about school, about friends, about normal 10-year-old things. The heaviness lifted. As the evening wound down, Michael walked them to Rebecca's car. The restaurant had accessible parking, and she'd gotten expert at loading Ethan's wheelchair into her SUV. She expected Michael to say goodnight at the door, to make his escape now that the date was technically over. Instead, he followed them out, watched as Rebecca helped Ethan into the car, then lifted the wheelchair with practiced ease. "Can I help?" Michael asked. "I've got it," Rebecca said. "I've done this 1,000 times." "I know you have," Michael replied. "But maybe you don't always have to do it alone." Something in the way he said it, not pitying, not rescuing, just offering, made Rebecca pause. She nodded, and Michael helped her fold the wheelchair and secure it in the back. When Ethan was settled with his tablet and headphones, Michael and Rebecca stood in the parking lot under the glow of streetlights, the autumn air cool around them. "I need to apologize again," Michael said, "for what I asked when you first arrived." "It wasn't honest," Rebecca interrupted. "It was an honest question. And honestly, I appreciate that more than polite lies." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Most people just stare and judge silently." "At least you asked." "Still came out wrong," Michael insisted. "Because here's the thing I realized tonight. You didn't bring your paralyzed kid to our date. You brought your son, a smart, funny, incredibly brave kid who happens to use a wheelchair. And you brought him because you're a good mom who's putting his needs first while also trying to build a life for yourself. That's not something to question. That's something to admire." Rebecca felt the tears come now, couldn't stop them. "Do you know how long I've waited for someone to see it that way?" "Too long, I'm guessing," Michael said softly. He reached out and gently wiped the tear from her cheek. "Rebecca, I'd like to see you again, both of you, if Ethan's up for it, or just you if we can arrange that. I'm flexible. But I want you to know your son isn't a deal breaker. He's part of your life, which means he's part of getting to know you. And from what I've seen tonight, that's a bonus, not a burden." Rebecca couldn't speak for a moment. Finally, she managed. "Are you sure? Because this isn't easy. There are doctor's appointments, therapy sessions, bad days when Ethan can't handle crowds or noise. There are stares and rude comments and accessibility issues everywhere we go. I come with complications." "So do I," Michael said. "I'm a workaholic who sometimes forgets to eat dinner. I have a sister with cerebral palsy who I'm very close to, which means family gatherings are always interesting. I'm afraid of commitment because my ex-wife left me for someone more exciting. Everyone has complications, Rebecca. Yours just happened to include an awesome kid who knows more about aerospace engineering than I do." He smiled. "I'll take those complications over someone with nothing interesting going on any day." Rebecca laughed through her tears. "He is pretty awesome, isn't he?" "The best," Michael agreed. He glanced at the car where Ethan was watching them, then back at Rebecca. "So, what do you say? Can we try this again?" "Yes," Rebecca said. "I'd like that very much." Their second date was just the two of them. Rebecca's mother took Ethan for the evening, and he went without anxiety because, as he told Rebecca, "Michael seems cool. You should go." Their third date, Ethan joined them again, this time at a science museum where Michael and Ethan got into a spirited debate about tensile strength versus compression in building design while Rebecca watched, her heart full. 6 months later, Michael asked both of Emma, Rebecca and Death on it if he could be a permanent part of their lives. He did it at the same restaurant where they'd met, in front of the same exposed brick and Edison bulbs. He had 2 questions prepared. "Rebecca, will you marry me?" he asked, getting down on one knee. And then, turning to Ethan, "And Ethan, will you let me be part of your team?" Not trying to replace your dada, nobody could do that, but maybe as someone who's here for you, who supports you, who thinks you're pretty remarkable. Ethan looked at his mother, then at Michael, then back at his mother. "Does this mean he'll help me with my Mars mission calculations?" Michael laughed. "Every single one." "Then yes," Ethan said, grinning. "Definitely yes." Rebecca couldn't answer at first as she was crying too hard, but eventually she managed to nod, and Michael slipped the ring onto her finger, and the restaurant erupted in applause from diners who'd been covertly watching the whole thing. Later, much later, when they were married and Michael had legally adopted Ethan, when they'd built a life together full of accessible adventures and engineering debates and the ordinary beautiful chaos of family, Rebecca would think back to that first night. She would remember Michael's question of "Why did you bring your paralyzed kid here?" and how it could have ended everything before it began. But she would also remember what came after, the apology, the genuine interest, the way Michael had seen past the wheelchair to the person in it. "You know what changed my mind that night?" Michael told her once, as they sat on their porch watching Ethan practice wheelchair basketball in the driveway. It was when Ethan said, "My mom deserves to have a life, and I'm part of that life." He was so matter-of-fact about it, like it wasn't even a question. And I realized that he's right. You two are a unit, and any man lucky enough to be with you gets both of you. That's not a compromise. That's a privilege. Rebecca leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad you figured that out." "Me too," Michael said. "Best decision I ever made." And watching Ethan sink a perfect basket, his face light with joy and determination, Rebecca had to agree. Sometimes the complications we think will push people away are exactly what draws the right person closer. Sometimes the questions that seem cruel are actually the beginning of understanding. And sometimes, just sometimes, showing up as your whole, complicated, beautiful self is exactly what's needed to find real love. Because real love doesn't ask you to choose between your child and your happiness. Real love understands that they're the same thing.